all of you. Yesterday we covered all this shell scripting. Maybe we went a little quick, I think, for some of you. But don't worry about it. Today we're going to continue on the shell scripting. Little more features I'll be telling you. But at the end of today's session, I'll be showing you one example. Okay, step by step, we'll be building one small program, an example. And during that time, if you have any questions about something we covered yesterday, you can ask about that. Okay. So now, in the first few slides, I'll be just covering a little more features of Bash, something called glob expressions and command substitution. And once you're done with that, we'll get to that example. Okay. So yesterday we covered. This is the last thing we covered. We wrote our unique fruits program using a for loop and using this special variable. Remember, $@ expands to all the command line arguments. So this is what it expands to. If you type something like $, this is what it expands to. Now we move to a new thing. Suppose you wanted to run your for loop. You wanted to run your for loop over all the files in your current directory that ended with the alphabets txt. Okay. So suppose you wanted to run the loop over all the files in your current directory with the ending with txt. So we'll write something like this for file name in *txt. So star is a special character in the shell. When the shell sees the star character, what does star means? Any 0 or more characters. Star means 0 or more alphabets. Characters, okay, to be specific, it can be alphabets or numbers. So what this means is any 0 or more number of characters followed by the characters txt. That's all. So what this expands to is all the files in the current directory with the txt ending with txt. The rest of the program is exactly the same. The rest of the loop is exactly the same. So when you run this command, what does *txt expand to? Now suppose you type ls in your current working directory. If you suppose you got these files, so you have this file context fruit.txt, a file called just txt, text file.dat. What would star.txt expand to? Star.txt. So this is what it would expand to. It would expand to these words, to these files. Now you'll notice that even the file name just txt also matches. So like I said earlier, the star matches 0 or more characters. So in this case, it matched 0 characters. So nothing, no characters followed by txt. That's just plain txt. Now once this is expanded by this shell, the effective for loop line seen by the shell looks like this. So for file name in and whatever *txt expanded to. Now there's a special name for this. *txt, any expression with using these special shell characters are called glob expressions. They're called globs. And within a glob expression, these characters have special meanings. So star, a question mark, and these square brackets, they have special meanings. So now you know what star stands for. So your star can appear anywhere in your string. So you can write something like con *txt. You can type something like this. So it can appear anywhere in your glob. So this would expand to the file names. Okay, this is 0 number of characters, or it would expand to. Okay, and it can even expand to something like. So 0 or more. Here it's matching 1. Here it's matching 3. Here 0. So that's star.
*txt.
Yes, you can use more than one meta character in the same expression. So you can use more than one star, like say, and it does the same thing. Okay. Now you look at question mark and the brackets. So the question mark also matches any character, but it matches only 1. So star matches 0 or more, but question mark matches only 1. So not 0 and not more than 1, but just 1. So suppose you wrote a glob like this. R question mark L. That's an L. So this will match file names or directory names like reel, reel, real, roll, r1 to even digits. But it matches only 2, but it will not match this. Okay, because the shell is going to look for R followed by some character and another character, and the third and the fourth character is going to expect is L. But over here there's no L. So this will not match. So it will not expand to this. Is that clear? Now the brackets. Now the brackets it works exactly like the question mark. It matches one character. But suppose you want to match only some group of characters. Now question mark will match any character. Suppose you want to match some subset of characters. Suppose you want to match only A and B or something like that. You would use the brackets. So you can restrict your single character matching to some set. So suppose you want to search only for digits, so 0 to 9. You would type something like this. This is R, a bracket, the digits from 0 to 9, close bracket, and L. So this will match file names like R2L, R9L, but it will not match R93L. For the same reason why this doesn't match ROL, because the shell is going to expect R, one of the characters from this set, and then an L. But here, 3 is not from 3 is not an L, so it doesn't match. Okay, maybe this one. So the glob looks like this: R 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and L. So this glob will match any one character from this set. So it can match a file name like R0, 0L or R9L. Okay. So it won't match this because the shell is expecting an L over here. So the bracket is like the question mark, but you can match some subset of your character of
Is it
the
for
whole.
only numerics or anything?
Sorry?
Is it only for numerics?
No, yeah, I'll show you in the next. Now suppose you want to match, suppose you want to negate this match. You want to negate it. Suppose you want to match everything except digits. Anything except digits, what you would do is you would negate this. In order to negate it, the first character after the bracket should be an exclamation point. Okay? So if you put an exclamation point there, it means that whatever in this set is negated. That means it's going this bracket, this glob is going to match anything except this. So that's so if you use an expression like this, it will match ROL. It can even match the file R_L, but it will not match this because 9 is from that set. Now it's kind of inconvenient to write long digits like this. So the glob syntax allows you to specify ranges. So the exact same, this expression and this expression do the exact same thing. So instead of specifying 0, instead of specifying all the numbers from 0 to 9, you can just specify 0 to 9 and L. Okay, so this is a range. So you specify a starting and an ending, and it fills in the characters between that. Now you can do this for alphabets also. So like you asked, if you use A to Z, A to Z, small, so these are lowercase. So this fills in all the alphabets from A to Z, from lowercase a to lowercase z. Now suppose you wanted M, N, O, and Q, you would use something like this, but all capitals. Now suppose you wanted lowercase and uppercase alphabets, you would use something like this. So this expands to all the lowercase alphabets up to Z and all the uppercase alphabets up to Z. Now you can put the starting and ending as anything as long as it's contiguous. So you can't put Z and then A. Okay, it should be contiguous. Now what happens? What happens if you don't have a file? Okay. What happens if you don't have a file which is matching that glob? So suppose you did ls and star.txt. Let's forget the star. Now suppose in your directory, suppose you looked at your directory, you did ls in your directory, there's no file which is ending with txt. What would the shell expand this to? So in that case, the shell would expand this, the shell would find that there's no file matching star.txt, and it would pass the star as a literal to the command. Got it? I'll show you. So maybe if you typed echo star txt in the directory which I showed you earlier, it would type all the files ending with txt. Show you let's try echo star.sh. Okay, so it's printing all the names of all the files ending with sh. Now suppose I made an empty directory and I did echo star.sh. Now there's no file in this directory which ends with star.sh. This directory is empty. So if I do echo star.sh, okay, it's going to be passed as a literal to the echo command. So earlier what the shell did is it expanded star.sh into all the files which ended with sh and passed their output to echo. So the effective command was echo and every file name ending with txt. But suppose the shell did not find any file ending with .sh, it passes the star as it is. So this is the same for any glob expression. So if you had a bracket expression or question mark and it didn't match, it's going to be passed as a literal. So echo saw a literal star.sh. Now,
For ls also it will.
yeah, it will work for ls also. So what happens when you type a command like this is that before your ls command runs, the shell is going to see the meta character and it's going to expand this. So effectively what the shell is going to run is ls and all the names of the files with sh. That's when ls actually runs. So all the expansion, when you're typing such expansions on the command prompt, everything happens before all expansion happens before the program. Now there are some really old Unix systems, in the original Unix systems. If you had a star dot something or star some expression with a glob and it didn't match any file, instead of passing the literal, it would just return an empty string. It would expand to nothing. So if you typed ls and star.s and there was no file, it would expand to just ls. So that was the old Unix standard. But then I remember I spoke about the single Unix specification, the POSIX standard. So the POSIX standard put this rule that when a glob expression doesn't match a file, you have to treat the glob as a literal. Okay, literal. So that's what prompted all the modern Linux distributions to follow this standard. There's a special environment variable that you can set that causes it to behave like the original Unix one.
Can negation be used with star?
Sorry?
Negation can be used with star.
No, so star matches anything. So the negative of that would be nothing. So you just leave it.
Apart from that part, can you use
Oh, you want to? No, that would be a function of the command. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You want to negate the meaning of the whole expression, all files except. That's not easily done in the shell. Now we'll go to command substitution. What is command substitution? Substitution, before we look at commands, we look at one new command called seq, sequence, a new command. Now before I go to the seq command, one of the questions I was asked is what's the difference between, I was talking a lot about built-ins and commands. What's the difference between a built-in and a command? So a command is a program, like any program which you would write, maybe written in C, and you compile it. So those are programs. When you run a program or a command, it actually starts a new process, right? But what's a built-in? A built-in is a special keyword that is recognized by bash, by shell. So it does not really start a new program. So for example, the cd command is a built-in. The cd, when you run cd command, it doesn't actually start a new program. But if you write the ls command, it actually starts a new program, right? So cd and many other commands are built-in commands. They don't require a new process to be created. The shell itself sees the command and gives you the output. Now seq is a command, it's not a built-in. So there's an actual program stored there. And seq is one of the core utils. So the core utils are all the commands, the external commands which you will find on the Linux system.
So actually, these comments like ls what you told, if I am pressing jobs in the terminal, then it will be showing some that the job is running.
Yeah, if you type ls and an ampersand, yes, it will show up in the jobs. And it will have its own process ID. Remember in the first class we talked about each process having its process ID? Now, a built-in command will not have a process ID. It's just something, it's a function of the shell itself. So the seq command is simple. At the prompt, if you type something like this, seq10, it just simply prints integers beginning from 1 up to that number, up to 10. So you got 1, 2, 3 up to 10. Simple command doesn't do anything. Sequence obviously has a lot of options and a lot of other features. You can print ranges not starting from 1, and you can print ranges which skip some numbers, like you can print all the even numbers, or you can print all multiples of 3. You can do all that stuff, but we'll look at a simple case where you just type seq and a number, and it gives you all the integers from 1 up to that number. So this is the output of that command. Yeah, so you can pipe it and remove. I'll show you the next one when you're talking about tr command. Okay. So like I told you, all the Unix commands do one thing very specifically. Okay. So sequence just prints sequences. Okay. Maybe there are some commands which can change the format of the output, but maybe it's easier to pipe it through another command and do the same. So yeah, we will be doing something like in the example. So look at this loop, this script. It has a for loop for I in, and we use this dollar bracket. We put sequence10, the command in between dollar sign and bracket, and then do done. So this is a loop. This is the body of the loop. We're going to echo the words data set followed by $i. Okay, so I'll explain what this does. First we look at this. So this is the syntax. This is the syntax for command substitution. So this is the syntax. You have a dollar sign and a bracket, and you can have any command inside here. Okay, you can have sequence10. Okay, you can even pipe it through something like sort or something. Okay, so you can have any pipeline, any command which you type, which you can run from the shell. You can put it in here. Now what this does, when the shell sees this, what it does is it's going to run this command. It's going to run this command in a subshell. And then once it gets the output of this command, okay, so remember earlier if you didn't put the dollar and the brackets, if you just type sequence10, it's going to be substituted by its exit status, right? But if you put dollar and the brackets, the shell is going to run this command, and it's going to substitute this line with the output of that command. So the output of this command is going to be the numbers 1 to 10, and the shell is going to substitute it over here. So effectively, now, you'll notice that I didn't put, now you can write, like you said, it produces the sequences in different lines. But you remember that for the for loop, you need to put the list in one line. So the shell takes care of that since it's not quoted. So we'll elaborate on that more. So what happens in the end is, after the shell runs sequence and substitutes output there, the effective for line is for I in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 10. Okay? Each one is separated by a space. So this is the effective line that your shell is going to see. So now you saw the for loop earlier. What it means is the for loop is going to loop over each of these numbers, and I is going to be assigned to each of these in sequence. So in the first loop I will get 1, in the second loop I will get 2 up to 10. Now inside the loop we have an echo. You know what that does? Echo prints whatever follows on the standard output. This is just a literal word data set, and here we have a variable $i. So again, the shell sees a $i here, a variable, and what it does is it expands it to the value of $i. It expands it to the value of I. So what's the value of I? In the first iteration, the value of I is 1. In the second iteration is 2, right? And so it's going to print data set 1, data set 2. So in the end, you'll get output that looks like this. Okay? So this is a command substitution. So in the final big example which I show you, we'll be using command substitution to do something useful. Okay, so before that, now we've seen so many constructs like the while loop, the for loop, we've seen the if condition, we've seen glob expressions, command substitution. We've written all of these in scripts. Okay, we've opened a Vim file, we've saved these scripts, and then we're running the scripts. Now, in the beginning of the class, I told you that the bash shell is a complete programming environment. And because of that, the bash prompt is also a complete programming environment. So all the programming constructs which I showed you up till now are available at the prompt. So you don't have to write all these commands into a file and save it and chmod it +x and run it. You can actually type it directly into your prompt. So if you type help and one of these consoles, so if you type help and if, it usually shows you the one-line version of those constructs. So what does that mean? So how do you type one of these commands on the shell directly? So one way to type it is you type each line of the construct and you get a thing called a secondary prompt. So I'll show you. Suppose you wanted to type a for loop for I in constant. Now this is the first line of our for loop. If you press enter here, you'll see you get something like this. This is called a secondary prompt, this one. Okay? It's just an arrow. So you're not getting a regular prompt, you're getting a secondary prompt. What the secondary prompt tells you is that it's expecting more input from you to complete the command. So now it's the shell sees that it got a beginning of a for loop, now it's expecting you to type in the rest of the for loop. So what's the rest of the for loop? You write do, okay, echo, alright. Now you need to close the for loop. You put done. That ends the for construct. And now you get the output which you expect. Now another way of typing a command, of typing a construct on the prompt is you replace all these new lines. So wherever you're beginning a new line, you replace it with a semicolon. Very simple. What you do is wherever you're starting a new line, you put a semicolon. So we're going to type the same command for I in sequence 10. Now we're supposed to start a new line here. Instead of that, we put a semicolon. The rest of the command is same. Do echo data set $i. Again, we're supposed to start a new line here. Done.
But after do?
Yeah, after do, there's no. Okay, I'll show you. So you have to refer to the help. So if you do this, you get the same output. So let's look at the help for. You used man pages, right, to see how commands are run. So if you want to see how a built-in is run, you have to use the help command. So the for loop is all built-ins. They're built-in functions of the shell. So let's see the help for for. So this is the. So when you type the help command, it's going to show you the one-line version of the construct. So see here, it says for name in words. We know that. We did for I in sequence 10. Then you have a semicolon, and immediately following the do is the commands. Suppose you had more than one command here. Suppose you wanted to run lscd in sequence. In your script, you would just type it one line after the other. Over here, what you would do is you would just separate it again with semicolons. So if you want to do echo dataset $i, you would do echo set echo dataset $i. Suppose you want to do echo something else $i. You would just put a semicolon and type the next command. So the do loop is going to execute all those commands, all the commands in between the do and the done. So how does the for loop know that the block is that your construct ends? It looks for this keyword, the done keyword, right? So very easy to change. So this is the same for a while loop. So if you want a while loop, it's the same. You type while command. So commands can be a condition also, you remember, those square brackets with some conditions. So while command, semicolon, again do some commands, done. So this is the same. So you can type all this on your command line. So you have complete access to all the constructs, all the conditionals that we showed you at the prompt. So usually when do you use things like this? Suppose you want to write a quick loop. Suppose you want to write a quick loop that sort of deletes all the files. Suppose you have files called data set and some number, and you have 100 of these files, and you want to delete all the files from dataset 0 up to dataset 10. You would write a quick loop like this on the command line, and you would write for I in sequence 10, do rm dataset $i, done. Now you don't need to put this in a script and then run it. That's a hassle, so you just do it on the command line directly. There's one thing you need to remember when you're doing commands on the command line. You remember in the first class I told you that when you type the commands directly on the shell, they're running in the shell itself, and when you run a script, it runs in a subshell. So the cd command was not affecting our current working directory when we ran it in a script, but when you ran it on the command line, it was affecting. So that same thing applies here. When you're typing commands here on the shell, even a for loop and a while loop, whatever, it's going to affect your current environment. So one quick way to show that is we just ran this loop. Now you notice that we're creating a variable here called I. Okay, I is a loop variable. So I is assigned each of these values from the sequence. Now because we're running it in the shell, your I is available after the program runs. So see, it's having the last value before the loop exited. But if you ran this in the subshell, you won't have the $I available after. So you need to remember that, because suppose you have a variable I existing before you run the loop, its value is going to change. Okay, so generally we write small scripts on the shell which don't do much of variables and stuff. If you have something complicated, you're better off putting it inside a script.
Vishal, when you wrote that for loop and you said done, it executed out of the shell. Okay. What if I want to put another for loop after that? The 2 for loops I want to put on the shell. So
You want to put 2 for loops after the shell. That you would have to execute it after that, because anyway it's going to execute after that, right? Maybe there's a better way, right? So like I said, if it's something complicated, you're better off putting it in a script. Yeah, so like I said, all the globs and redirection, all these commands are available, all these meta characters, all these special features are available to you at the prompt. So generally you'll find when you're using the prompt, you'll be using globs and redirections a lot. So look at these examples, ls star.txt. What does it do? When the shell sees star.txt, it expands it to the name of all the files in the current directory that end with .txt. So what ls does is going to list all those files. Now look at this grep subroutine star.f. You remember the grep command? The grep command searches for this string within your file. Not visible. So at the command line, this is our command prompt. You're going to write grep subroutine star.f and you're going to output it to. Okay. So you know the grep syntax, grep pattern file. So grep, our pattern is the word subroutine, and for the file we put star.f. So the shell sees the star.f, it's going to expand it to the names of all the files that end with .f in your current directory, and grep is going to search for this word within all of those files. So if you look at the grep man page, at the end of the file, okay, grep pattern file, you have the ellipsis. That means you can put more than one file there. So that's what we're doing here. The star.f expands to maybe one or more files. And whatever the output, the grep writes it output to standard output, you're redirecting that standard output to a file. So now you have a file which contains all the occurrences of the word subroutine, all your star.f files. Now grep by default, when you provide it with more than one file name, it also adds the name of the file to the beginning of output. So it will the output will be the file name, the line number, and the matching line. So that way you can know which line came from which file. That's grep's default behavior. You can switch that off using an option. Okay, so now we're going to do a little example. Okay, a little bit complicated example where we're going to build a program step by step, and we'll be using all the constructs, most of the constructs we saw earlier to build this example. So what are we going to do? We're going to make an example where we want to make a little utility, a small utility that will count the number of occurrences of a particular word in some text. So you remember we ran the sort command. So you remember our unique fruits program? Our unique fruits program was like this. Type unique fruits and the name of the file. So fruits.txt. This is how our command worked. Now suppose we wanted to work something like sort or unique. You remember when you used unique, you could do something like this. Cat file.text, and you could pipe it through unique. So unique supports So unique acts like a filter over here. You have cat writing its output to standard output. It goes through unique and unique writes it to standard output. So we want to write a program that behaves something like this. So we want this to work. This is our script file. Okay, you should have a dot slash over there. So we want a script file to work like this. And when you run this command line, what we want it to do is we want it to search for the number of times the word apple appears in this text file. Right? This is what our aim is. So how do we build this program, this script? So actually what we're doing here is we're building our own little Unix filter. Right? You'll find that most programs in Unix, most of the commands in Unix can behave like this. They can accept input from the standard input. But this command did not read from standard input. You had to provide the file name after it. But most of the commands read from standard input because that's why every Unix command allows it to be connected to another one, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build our own little filter script. So before we build our script, we need to know three more things, three more features of the shell we should be using. One is the arithmetic expansion, the read built-in, and the tr command. So let's look at the arithmetic substitution. So just like you saw command substitution earlier. So we saw command substitution. What's the syntax for command substitution? The dollar sign and brackets and commands. Now for arithmetic expansion, it's a similar syntax. It's dollar and two brackets. You close it two brackets, and you can type some expression here. So what this means is that when the shell sees a dollar and a double bracket enclosing some expression, it evaluates this expression as though it was some arithmetic expression. Okay? So it looks at it as though it was some arithmetic. So you can use the arithmetic operators over here. So see this. We're creating a variable ivar with a value 6. Okay, regular variable creation. Now we're using our arithmetic expansion syntax over here. And we're using $ivar plus 10. So what does the shell do over here? The shell creates a variable ivar with a value 6. Now shell comes to this line. Now the shell sees that there's a variable $ivar, there's a variable name. So what it's going to do is going to expand it. So it's going to expand it to the value of what it contains. So the effective line is echo 6 plus 10. Okay? This is the effective line. So now the shell, when it sees something like this, it evaluates this as a arithmetic expression, and it's going to substitute this whole thing. It's going to substitute this whole thing with the result. So you're going to get echo 16. Okay? This is arithmetic expansion. Really simple. So you can use all your regular operations inside. You can use multiply, divide. Okay?
The first dollar is of the prompt.
Yeah, the first dollar of the prompt. Yeah. So I'm just showing you that I'm typing this at the prompt. So you type this at the prompt. This is the result, the output. Okay, sorry about that. So you can use multiply, divide, everything. Now remember, the shell doesn't support floating point arithmetic. So don't try to do your scientific stuff, and you have to use an external program for that.
So it is valid only for integers?
Yeah, it works only for integers.
But I can possibly use some command like BC or
Exactly.
something and then
Exactly. So you'll have to use an external command like BC, which supports floating point arithmetic. And you'll have to pipe your expression. Suppose you had an expression 2.5 plus 3.6. You would pipe that expression into your BC command, and then use command substitution to get the output. BC command is a calculator.
bench calculator.
Bench calculator. Okay. BC command it's like a calculator on the shell. It supports arbitrary precision arithmetic. Arbitrary precision. That means you can use any number of digits after the decimal point.
Sure. You are telling external command, BC command.
Yeah.
BC command also will give floating point value. How will you support?
Yeah, so we will be using command substitution. For example, you'll type something like echo. Not sure about syntax. You'll type something like 2.5 into 3, and you'll pipe it through BC. Okay. Now you put this inside a command substitution, right? So what is the output of BC? BC is going to write the result to standard output as a string. So it's going to write the result as a string, and that string is substituted in place of the whole thing. But with that output, you can't do any further calculation in the shell. Suppose you want to do something more with that number, you have to again pipe it through BC, right? So whenever you want to work with floating point numbers, you have to pipe it through BC. So that shows you arithmetic substitution, arithmetic expansion. Sorry. Now the read built-in. The read built-in, if you look at the help page, what does the read do? It reads a single line from standard input and assigns it to the variable name. Simple. Read has a bunch of options. It has a lot of options. It can do a lot of things. But we just need the basic functionality of this read built-in. So if you type a command like this, read name, it's going to read one line from standard input and write and save it in this variable. So let's look at how it works on the prompt. So if you type read, can everybody see all 4 lines of this? No? So at the prompt, if you type $read iword, okay, what's the output you're going to get? You're going to get a blank line. Why is that? So read reads from standard input. Now standard input by default is connected to the keyboard, right? You're not piping anything to this, so by default it's connected to the keyboard. So after you type read iword, you're going to get a blank line. That tells you that the shell is waiting for some input from the keyboard. So we type the words to space words, and you press enter. When you press enter, enter creates a new line character. Okay, so when read sees a new line character, it knows that it has completed reading one line. So read's function is to read only one line. So when you press enter, the read returns. And what is it going to do? It's going to save the words which it read from standard input into a variable called name. Over here, we're using iword as the name. So let's see what's contained in the variable iword. We'll do echo $iword. So the shell is going to see $iword is going to expand it to the value contained. You're going to get the same thing which you typed over there as the output.
What is the behavior of iword read variable? Is it a string or a character of type?
So shell is typeless. Remember yesterday I told you the shell doesn't care about type. Everything is a string. Okay, now the tr command. The tr command is the last thing that we need to see before we start our example. There are a lot of examples here, but I'll tell you, if you look at the man page of the tr command, the man page says tr translates or deletes characters. Okay, translates and deletes characters. So let's look at the example on the prompt. Suppose you typed echo and this string, okay, and you're piping it through tr. So what does echo and the string does? It's going to write the exact same string onto standard output. Now the pipe stick connects the standard output to standard input of tr. And look at tr. Tr over here has 2 arguments, 2 command line arguments, the string I and the string a. So by default, what tr does when you pass two strings, it's going to translate. So every occurrence of I is changed to a. So look at the output. Everywhere I has come, you got a. And you'll notice that it's case sensitive. Okay, everything in Unix is case sensitive, so it didn't convert the capital I. Now let's see another example. You don't have to provide just one, you can provide 2. So suppose you type something like this, tr, is and at. What it does is, tr translates the I character, every occurrence of I, to a, and it translates every occurrence of s to t. So you might mistake, on first seeing this, you might think that every occurrence of is converted to at. So that's not the case. Tr does not translate words. It only translates single characters. So this set should be the same length as this set. So if you have 3 characters here, you should have 3 characters here. The first one is converted to the first one here, I is converted to s is converted to capital T. Okay? So see the output? It's done exactly like that. Now you can provide ranges here. Suppose you wanted to make this whole thing uppercase. You can translate. So remember the ranges we used earlier in the globs. You can use a similar range but without the brackets. Lowercase a up to lowercase z. This expands to a, b, c up to z. And uppercase A to uppercase L. So that's all the alphabets up to all the uppercase alphabets. So lowercase a is converted to uppercase A, and lowercase b is converted to uppercase B. So the whole string comes out as uppercase. Now tr has one more function. If you pass the -d option, to tr, it does deletion of characters. So if you do tr-d and you put some characters here like I or S, INS, it's going to delete every occurrence of character I, and it's going to delete every occurrence of the character S. So here in this example, we've done tr-d and I. So it's removed every occurrence of I in the string. It's just deleted, it's removed it. Now same thing, you can provide more than one character here. It removes each of those characters. Okay, so this delete, so tr is going to delete I, it's going to delete S. So you can see tr does something very specific, very simple.
Sure. Is this space sensitive? Is
Case sensitive?
Space means like tr minus d, and you have in quotes.
Inside the quotes, if you put a space, yes. So suppose you want to replace the space with something else, with a star or something. You could put tr and inside quotes a single space, and then you could put inside quotes a star. So every space in your string is converted to a star character.
My question is following. If tr-d quote I space s, I put a space between them, I and s.
Yeah.
Will it still work? Like the
It
same?
will work, and it will delete all the space characters also in your string. So a space is a character.
Oh,
Okay, any character with ASCII code, you can put inside here. So space is a character just like new line and
Okay,
tab.
it will also take it as a character.
Yeah, so it's going to remove these spaces
This is
also.
actually-
Yeah, so it'll remove the spaces, it'll remove the I, and it'll remove the S. We have- I'm sorry? Yeah, help? TR is a command, it's not a built-in. So you should either do man TR or TR minus minus N. Trap. Okay, trap is a built-in shell built-in. It's for trapping signals, for catching signals that you send to a. So you remember, okay, maybe we should not go into that, but earlier I told you that when you terminate a command, it sends a signal. So you can send a signal to a script also, and you can tell the script to do something specific when it sees a signal. So that's when you set a trap. You trap a signal, you catch it, and then you do something. Okay, let's get back to this. So now you know what the TR does. TR does something really specific. Just translates some characters. Now TR doesn't translate words, but next week we'll be looking at something that can translate words. Okay, so let's build our example, our word counting application, word counting utility. We'll build it step by step. So this is the first. This is a script we're going to start with. What we need to do in the beginning is we need our script to read each line from the input. Right? That's our first step in our development of the script. So let's write a simple loop while read input line. So you remember the read command? The read built-in reads one line from input and stores it in this variable. Now why did we put in a while loop? We put in a while loop so that it reads every line from standard input. Okay? It just keeps reading line after line. So it's a loop. But when does the loop terminate? Now suppose the read command is reading from standard input and the standard input ends. Suppose we're catting a file. Suppose we're catting a file like this to your read command. As soon as the file ends, okay, it's gonna close the pipe. When file ends, it's gonna signal to read that they're out of lines. It's gonna send the end of file character. Once read sees the end of file character, it's going to return a false, it's going to return a failed exit statement. Okay, sorry, exit status. So as long as the exit status of this whole command, the read input file is true, it shows success, the loop is going to continue. So it's going to keep reading lines until it runs out of lines. So when read runs out of a line, it returns a failed exit status and the while loop is going to stop. Is that okay? Is that clear? How to use the read statement inside a loop. So read reads one line, you put in a loop to read any number of lines. How do you know when to stop? When the exit status comes false. Okay. Now what are we doing inside the loop? is we're just printing this value. We're echoing this value onto the screen. So what will this loop do? Okay, it's reading a line and then echoing the line back out. Yeah, it's just like cat. So we just test each stage of our script just to see if it works properly. So I have this little a small example input file. So create the small example input file so that we can pipe it inside our script and see if it works. So I've already created this script earlier. So this is the same input which you saw in the slide. We're going to run it. So I'm doing cat, our example input file, and I'm going to pipe it through our script. So what you're going to do is just going to print out the lines as it is. Okay? So we're done with the first part. We're done with looping over our input. Now what do we need to do? We need to loop over the words. We need to split, yes.
How does we specify end of file on command line argument?
On the command line argument or on the command line at the prompt?
Yeah, on command line.
Yeah, it's a control D character. Okay.
How does it go to the next line? If the input file is same, right? It should be always the first line.
Yeah. So this is not reading from a file. Okay, it's reading from standard input. Okay, standard input is also a file, but once you read something from standard input, whatever you read is the file pointer has moved. The next time you do a read on that same file, you're going to get the next line. Okay, so suppose you write a program in C and you read a line from a file. The next time you execute a read command, what do you get? You get the next line. You don't get the same thing. Because there's a thing called a file pointer, okay? So whenever you read from a file, the file pointer moves. So you read 5 bytes from the file, the file pointer moves 5 bytes. Whenever you execute the next read command, it's going to read whatever comes after that, right? So that's what the read does. It's reading from the standard input file, and whenever you run read, it's going to start from the continuing file pointer. So we got each line. We got each line in input line. So input line contains the first line in the first loop, it contains the second line in the second loop. Okay, so we have each line. Now what do? We need to split it into words. So I just highlighted the part which I'm changing in this color. I hope it's visible. So what we're doing is we need to split our input into words. So we got the line, now we'll split our line into words. What we'll do is we'll use a for loop. So what does input line expand to? Suppose our text file. Suppose our text file had some first line of something, okay? Some word, some sentence. Okay? This is the first line of a text file. So when the read loop completes the first iteration, $input line, the variable $input line, $input line is going to have this string inside it. It's going to have this string. Now suppose you write for word in $input line, what is it going to expand to? If you write that, what is it going to expand to? It's going to expand to this, for word in. Okay? It's going to expand to for word in your first line. Now you remember that for the for loop, how do you specify the list? The list is some words which are separated by space. Okay? So what's this loop going to do? It's going to loop over each word in your first line. So your variable word is going to be assigned Unix first in the first loop. In the second loop is going to be assigned class. In the third loop is going to be assigned day. Okay? So now we managed to separate words. Over here we're just echoing that variable. So I saved this also. So what do you think the output is going to be? So what does echo do? There's one small detail about echo. After echo writes a string to the standard output, it also adds a new line. It appends a new line to the end.
Should
So what are you going to get?
all the words it should.
Exactly. So I stored this as C word 2. Okay, the exact same program. Okay, so you got every word in line. Okay. So we're done with that. Now we need to do something with each word. You need to check if the word matches the word which you're looking for. Okay. So that's the next stage. So whatever I highlighted here is the new code. Everything else is the same as the previous. Okay. So I just added these lines. So we have a while loop, we have a for loop, we're getting each word. Now let's compare the words. Let's compare word with what we're searching for. So you remember $1 is the first command line argument we're passing to our script. So we were planning to run a script like this, right? cwords.sh and the word we're searching for. Okay. So when you run the script like this, where does the word apple go? It goes into the variable $1. Okay, the first command line argument, right? So what we're doing here is we're using an if statement. We're using our bracket test condition. Remember the brackets? Inside the bracket, we're putting $word. $word expands to what? $word expands to the current word it's looping over. So if you're in the first line, first word is going to contain the first word. The second loop, so you have an inner loop which is looping over the words and outer loop is looping over the lines. So we have a word, $word expands to the current word which is being looped over, and $1 contains the word we're looking for. So suppose it matches, we're going to echo that word. So echo $word. So let's check this. Now we need to provide an argument. Since we are looking for $1, we need an argument. So we'll pass an argument to word the, okay, the. And we're getting 3 occurrences of the. Right? So it works. It's finding some words matching. Okay? So the next step. So now we're done with where we managed to find the words which we're looking for. The next step is we need to count. Okay, we need to keep count of how many words we found. So how do you do that? You just need to add 3 lines here. So in the beginning of the loop, before we begin any looping, we're creating a variable with a value 0 in it. Okay, count equals to 0. Simple. Now within the loop, whenever the if condition is true, so the if condition is if word is matching the word we're looking for, then do this. So what does it do? You remember the arithmetic expansion syntax? So you remember the arithmetic expansion syntax? It's this, right? So we got an arithmetic expansion syntax over here. $, 2 brackets, and you put the variable name count plus 1. So count is going to be substituted to the current value of count. In the first loop it's going to be 0. So you get 0 plus 1. So this whole thing is going to be replaced with the output of that, with the result. So you will get count equals to 1. So now count has got a new value. And at the end of the loop, once we're done with looping all the lines, once our read has done with reading all the lines of the file, we want to print the total out. So we just put an echo, you will be able to see in the end. So at the end of the file, at the end of the loop, we just put an echo $count to print the total, right?
Do we need to use dollar in front of count here mathematically?
Yes, so whenever the shell sees a doll over here, yes, because we need the value of count.
But previously when you are using with IVAR, should you use a dollar symbol in front of IVAR?
You did.
Previously.
I didn't. It was?
It was there.
It was there, right? Yeah, so you have to have a $sign. So whenever the shell sees a $sign over there, it's going to replace it with it's going to expand it to the current value. Only during assignment will you see a variable without a $sign. In assignment and in these kind of lines. When you're creating a new variable.
So in the command prompt, you just type like I word. You
Yes.
get that without a dollar.
Yeah, so there we wrote read I word. read I word. So they were creating. So it's the same as this. You don't have to put a dollar. But when you want to echo I word, you want to print the result, I put echo $I word. Right? So that time the shell does substitution. So here the shell doesn't do any expansion. So let's run those examples quickly. We're searching for the B word again and prints the result, okay? Prints 3. So good. Now program is almost complete. Now there's a problem. Suppose we look at our input file, we look at our text short file and we search for B. So I'm doing a case insensitive search. You'll find that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 occurrences. There's 4 occurrences of D, not 3. So the first one didn't detect because it's a capital T. So we need to make our program work case insensitive. So how do we do that? So here we use command substitution. What we're going to do is we're going to take our input line, and earlier you saw the tr command. We're going to use tr to convert all the characters to lowercase. All the characters to lowercase. So if you look at this line, we have our command substitution syntax, which is a $. Okay, this is command substitution, and we're echoing input line. So our loop reads each line, right, from the input. So we're going to echo that line, echo input line, and we're going to pipe it to the tr command. And you remember the tr command for converting lowercase to uppercase, we're going to use the exact same thing. So we're going to convert uppercase to lowercase.
Isn't it too much of work?
Sorry?
Isn't it too much of work to convert the whole into uppercase?
Yeah, so the computer is going to do it. Now there's a shell built-in syntax to do conversion of a variable to uppercase or lowercase, but we're not using that because we want to show you command substitution, right? So when you want to do this on 100 files, okay, this is what you're going to do. So you got this line, it echoes the input line, okay? There's something missing here. I'm supposed to put a $sign here. Okay, it echoes, input line expands to your line. You're going to echo that. What does echo do? It writes it to standard output. You're piping that standard output to the standard input of tr. It's going to convert all the capitals to lowercase. Now we have command substitution. So the whole result of this, the output of tr, is going to be substituted over there. Now, considering you asked me yesterday, can we assign the output of a command to a variable? That's exactly what we're doing over here. We have a variable input line, and we're assigning the output of this entire pipeline into that command. So we put quotes over here. We put quotes over here to protect the spaces. Okay, to protect the spaces. If you wrote a line like this, input line equals to 1 space 2. If you write something like this, it's not going to execute because the shell is going to see that there's a 2 command. So it's going to say that 2 command not found. So how do you protect the space in a string? You just put a quote, right? So it protects the space. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're converting up as soon as we read a line, we're converting it to lowercase, passing it to input line. So now our program should work a little better. Close it. Okay, so you got the error because I didn't pass the argument. So I need to pass an argument, D, and now it works better. It's finding the capital D and the small d. So good, to include a program. Now let's assume that the user is not very smart and that he also, whenever the user types a capital TH on the command line, what he actually means is a case insensitive match, right? But normal users, when you type a capital PH in a command prompt, that's what you're expecting to search. But just for a demonstration purpose, let's assume he means case insensitive match all the time. So we'll add this lines. Okay, 3 more lines are added. So the string which the user is searching for, that string is going to come into $1, right? Into $1. Now you can't assign to $1. $1 is like a fixed variable. You can't change its value. So what we want to do is we want to convert it to lowercase and store it somewhere. So what we'll do is we'll copy the value of $1 to this variable called search word. So we copied the value of $1 to search word. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with input line. We're going to take search word and convert every uppercase alphabet into lowercase. And then you remember our if, which compared the word with the string we're searching for. We're going to change that $1 to search word. Okay, so this change is simple. The reason we have to go around copying the value and then changing it is because we can't assign to $1, right? So we're done with that. So if you type this command with a capital THE at the command line as an argument, it's going to give you the same result, 4. Now there's one problem with this script. Let's look at the input. Suppose we search for the word, suppose we search for the word clones. Will it find it? We search for the word clones?
No.
No, right?
Bracket.
Yeah, because the bracket is there. We need to fix that. So let's fix that. What we need to do is we need to remove all punctuation for an input line before we do our search. Because we need to remove periods, brackets, commas, okay, quotations, quotes, single quotes, double quotes, all that. So just one more line in our file. Before we convert everything to lowercase, you can do this even after. Before converting everything to lowercase, we use a tr-d command. So you remember tr-d removes, deletes the set of characters that are specified from the input. So you'll see I put tr-d and within quotes, I put a period. Okay. Can you see this? Is it visible? Yeah. So tr-d period, comma, an open bracket, close bracket, okay, a single quote. Okay, we're going to remove all these characters. Now I also want to remove a double quote. Now we have a problem. I'm enclosing this entire set within quotes. Now if I put a quote over here, the shell is going to think that the string is over. Okay, it's going to think, you're going to have 2 quotes over here. So the shell is going to think, okay, it sees this quote and it's going to think, okay, that's it. And it's going to complain about this extra quote. So if you type these 2 quotes like this, it's going to complain. So how do you tell the shell to ignore this quote? You use something called an escape. You use an escape. So if you want to tell the shell that ignore this quote, it's not a closing quote character, it's just a literal quote. So if you want to tell the shell to pass this quote directly to tr without doing any processing, you just put a backslash before it. Okay, it's a backslash. So in your part names you use a forward slash, this is a backslash. So backslash removes the special meaning of the quote character. Now there's one more application of this on the command line. Suppose you had a directory, okay, we're just digressing a little bit. Suppose you had a directory that had files like this. Okay, if you type ls, you get a file like this. Okay, suppose this directory had 3 files. con.txt, file.txt and star.txt. Yeah, you can name files with a star in it, okay? So suppose you want to remove this file, just this file. Suppose you want to just remove this file. What you would do? You would do rm star txt, right? Okay. So if you do this, what's going to happen? The shell is going to see star txt. It's going to expand it to the name of all 3 files, and you're going to lose all 3 files. So how do you tell the shell to ignore the star character? How do you tell the shell that it doesn't? You don't expand this. So what you do is you put a backslash before it. Okay. There's another way to prevent expansion, okay, of meta characters. You put double quotes. Now there's a difference between using double quotes and single quotes and a backslash. Okay, I'll tell you that later. But now you should know how to remove the special meaning of. So this can be any meta character. Okay, suppose it's a question mark. You can put a backslash and the special meaning of question mark is gone. So that's it.
What if you want to remove that?
If you want to, if you do 2 backslashes, okay? 2 backslashes expands to a single backslash. That's it. So that's it. This works. It works for the one with punctuations also. I'll just show you. So suppose we search for clones in shell. So it gives you 1. So it finds a clone because it removed all the punctuation. So this example program is not there in the notes which I will send you. That's because I didn't make it during that time when I was creating the notes. Maybe I'll send you the slides or I'll send you the script file itself in the email. Thank you.